I've never played an Armored Core game before, but knowing that people love the series and the fact that it comes from the same people that made Elden Ring, I am hyped for it. For those of you that are like me and know very little about the series, number one, it is a mech game, and number two, it's a From Software game, and they know how to make a game. Well, looking at the financial performance of Elden Ring on the Steam Deck, it makes a lot of sense that the devs would do everything that they can to make sure that their next game will perform well, both graphically and financially, on Valve's handheld. In a recent interview with Digital Trends, they said this: obviously, seeing how well Elden Ring performed on the Steam Deck, we are very happy, and we wanted to at least create that as a baseline going forward for this handheld. So it is fully supported for Steam Deck. We just want to reassure players that it will be fully supported. Now, Valve has yet to mark the game as verified, and lots of people, myself included, are really starting to question what does verified really mean. I mean, I've put out multiple videos about it, but we've seen lots of games that are verified that really don't pass the smell test. It is great, though, that the devs are looking at the Steam Deck as a platform itself that they want to support. Say what you will about all the other PC handhelds out there, but none of them have the support from the devs like the Steam Deck does. Back to Armored Core. F Extra Life, which I never know how to say that, they have a video out that shows that the game can be about 50 to 60 hours long, which is probably exciting for a lot of you. For me, though, it kind of pushes me away. I'll still absolutely check the game out. I mean, we don't get enough mech combat games these days, but I know that I won't finish it. What do you all think is the perfect length for a video game? I personally like games to be finishable in about 10 to 20 hours with lots of extra side stuff for everyone else. Since we're on the topic of massive games, I've got some good news from Ubisoft, which is in short supply these days, and it has to do with Star Wars Outlaws. Here's the quote: "Our objective is to really get people into a very dense, rich adventure, open world adventure that they can explore at their own rhythm. So it is absolutely not a 200 or 300 hour epic unfinishable RPG. This is a very focused action-adventure RPG that will take people on a ride and is very manageable." I personally love hearing this, but I'm really curious what you all think, because I can absolutely see how some people might be disappointed at the news. Do you prefer these huge monster games, or do you prefer the games to be a little bit more bite-sized and manageable? And now the other side of the coin, let's take a look at some terrible news from Ubisoft. They might shut down your account if you don't log in often enough. Twitter user PC Enjoyer posted this: "Ubisoft closes your account if you haven't logged in for some time. You will lose all your games purchased forever." And then they posted a screenshot of an email that they received. "We noticed that you have not been using Ubisoft account associated with this email address. We have temporarily suspended your inactive Ubisoft account and will be closing it permanently in 30 days in accordance with our terms of use. If you wish to keep your Ubisoft account, you can cancel its closure by clicking on the cancel button below before a certain date." And Ubisoft's response to this is an absolute joke, if you ask me. Here's what they said: "Hey there, we just wanted to chime in that you can avoid the account closure by logging into your account within the 30 days since receiving the email pictured, and selecting cancel account closure link contained in the email. We certainly do not want you to lose access to your games or account, so if you have any difficulties logging in, then please create a support case with us." This is an absolutely terrible response for a bunch of reasons. Maybe you don't have that email account anymore. How are you going to get alerted that your account might be closed? What if you're like me and you get mountains of emails from video game companies all the time, most of which is marketing nonsense? You're likely to ignore that stuff and you might miss them. On top of that, I don't know about you, but I generally try to avoid clicking on things in email because it could just be a phishing scam. Now, some of you are probably thinking, but Bill, I bought my games on Steam. Too bad, because guess what? You still have a Ubisoft account if you're playing Ubisoft games, and if they shut down your account, you'll not be able to play those games that you paid for. Now, Ubisoft insists that they would never do this, and it's only so that they can be compliant with data protection laws, but still, the idea that they can, man, that just makes me nervous. Next up, some games might be tracking you, not your in-game character to see where you stop playing or something like that, but you as a person. They're tracking because they want to find out if you bought a game after it being served an ad for that game. Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, a game that I have praised repeatedly for its awesome old school CRPG goodness, more on CRPGs later, recently had a pretty big update to the game, and this included something called Appsflyer, which is described by developer Owlcat as an industry standard tracking solution that allows developers and publishers to understand which part of players have purchased the game due to an impact of their advertising campaigns. Basically, it nabs your IP, timestamp when you launch the game, your operating system, the store you're playing on, and then it matches all of this information against a database provided by advertisers so they can see who bought a game after seeing an ad for it. It is worth noting that the game didn't have this at launch and that the EULA actually had to be updated to allow them to collect this data, but if you refused to click yes on the EULA, you could no longer play the game that you paid for. Owlcat said they expected some backlash, but nothing like what they got. Some of our users are quite pessimistic about this, said the liaison, but the scale of the outburst surpassed even the worst expectations, and it had to be reacted quickly upon. They have since removed the patch, and they've said that they've deleted all data collected, but now that we know about it, I wonder what other games are using Appsflyer to track you. A little bit ago, I told you about Dolphin coming to Steam, and then later I told you that, well, hold on, maybe not, because Nintendo was getting in the way. Well, it's been a while, and the developers of Dolphin have finally responded to all of the speculation that we've been seeing. They took their time, talked to a lawyer, and came back with this. Essentially, they feel like they didn't do anything wrong, but they also don't want to pick a fight with Nintendo, so they decided not to publish their emulator on Steam. Now, when this first broke, I said it was probably their best move. It's hard for a small upstart to stand up to a giant corporate money, and while I'm sure that we'd all like to see Nintendo taken down a peg, there is also a distinct possibility that if this did go to court, Nintendo could win, and that would be precedent setting. So we want to make sure that this stuff stays out of court. Of course, I'd also love to see Nintendo go to court and lose in the name of video game preservation, but they have really deep pockets and lots of lawyers, and lots of times that's just more important than whether or not you're on the right side of history or not. But either way, you can still install Dolphin on your computer the old-fashioned way and just throw stuff in Steam manually, or you can use Emudeck for Windows. Speaking of Emudeck for Windows, I recently upgraded my arcade cabinet with Emudeck for Windows and my ROG Ally. I'll leave a link in the description down below if you guys want to check out that video. Next up in emulation news, this is just wow. Somebody who works on the Canary build of Xenia really doesn't like piracy, and they wanted to make sure that everybody knew about it. Now, if you don't know what an ISO is, basically it's an exact copy of a disk. So if you loaded an ISO into Xenia, it would flash a screen up that admonished you for piracy, and not only that, but it would blast at full volume a shrill beeping noise even if you had your PC on mute. You might be wondering, what is the point of this? Well, I guess the devs want you using the XEX files instead of ISO files, and they're essentially saying that only scrubs would use ISO files, people that rip their own stuff would use XEX. So anyone that's using ISO files are probably not ripping the data from the disks themselves and are downloading these ISO files off of the internet. But there's lots of uses for ISOs that aren't necessarily piracy. And while I don't condone piracy, I do think that emulation isn't necessarily piracy, and I'm all for the preservation of games, which we know is low on the priority list for some game companies. So it's up to us to preserve those games. Either way, this entire controversy is more than a little funny, but it's also a warning. You never know what you're going to get when you're downloading software like this off of the internet. It could be exactly what you want, or it could be something that'll crank your volume to the max and play loud sounds that yell at you for being a dirty, filthy pirate. All right, everybody, today is the day. The game that could not be made on the PS4 is now on PC, and it turns out Insomniac was right. Tons of people have speculated that it was just Sony marketing nonsense that Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart was a PS5 exclusive because it couldn't run on a PS4. Well, the doubters were wrong. John Linneman over at Digital Foundry decided to test the game, which just released on PC, on a PS4 hard drive, and it was a chug fest. Every time Ratchet opens a portal, the game freezes while the data is loaded in, and then it unfreezes. It would have been a terrible experience to play the game this way, and I guess it just goes to show that an SSD is needed in order to play a game like this on old school hardware like a PS4. Of course, you don't have to have an SSD to run this game, but running it on a launch edition PS4 is not going to be an option. The game is going to chug like crazy, and I think Insomniac made the right move by making this game PS5 exclusive. Speaking of games that people have been waiting for, Nintendo just added 2 games to the Nintendo Switch Online. They are 2 Zelda games, Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons. This is part of the base tier, so if you pay for Nintendo Switch Online, then you have these games. Myself, I'm going to play them on Steam Deck or on my Retroid Pocket instead by using emulation, for the most part because playing games on the Switch is terribly uncomfortable experience, though I will say it is nice to see these games come to the Switch. I really do hope we end up getting that long-rumored Zelda collection that brings the rest of the Zelda games to the Switch, so you can play every Zelda game on the Switch legally without resorting to, crime. And if you couple that with the idea that Nintendo has been rumored that the next system that they put out is going to have backwards compatibility with the Switch games, that sounds awesome to me. Since the start of this console generation, Microsoft has been leaning really heavy into the service side of things, while PlayStation continues to kind of try to do things in a more traditional way. And it seems like it might be working out for Microsoft. They just released their Q4 financials, and even though hardware is on the decline and game sales are essentially flat, Xbox gaming grew 5% year over year and player hours were up 22%. So people are playing games on Xbox and Xbox is making money, but they just aren't selling anything other than subscriptions. Speaking of Xbox, Microsoft is rolling out the new home experience. I have to say that the Xbox UI is pretty terrible, and this is an upgrade pretty much across the board, but my biggest complaint was not addressed here. Shutting down your Xbox has been a pain this gen. If I hold down the Xbox button, sometimes it pops up the menu that I want to shut the Xbox down, but other times it pops up a different menu and I have to do it again. I just wish there was a better way to shut your Xbox off. The PlayStation's UI is miles ahead of the Xbox, even with this new update, but it's nice to see Microsoft making progress. And while we're on the subject of Xbox updates, there's a new update in the Insiders program where you can bind your controller to keyboard keys. There's a few caveats though. You have to be in the correct ring of the Insiders program, and you have to be using a Xbox Elite Wireless Controller Series 2 or the Xbox Adaptive Controller, which is pretty disappointing. I've really wanted to try and use my Alpaca controller on the Xbox or on my PlayStation, as it mimics a mouse and keyboard, but I've never been able to get it working. But listen, Microsoft, can we please get gyro officially working on your controllers? You are the only ones holding us back. Feel free to yell at me in the comments about how much you hate gyro. I love it. And since we're talking about controllers, I thought this was hilarious. Xbox is selling pizza themed controllers, but they don't just look like pizza, they smell like pizza too. This is a marketing push for the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. I love how stupid this is, and I want to have one of these, but only because it's so stupid. But since we're talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I'm glad that they went with a pizza scent rather than other scents related to the turtles, like Sewers, the Foot Clan, or the inside of Krang's brain jar. Moving on from Microsoft, PlayStation's Project Q may have been leaked, and it looks like it might be running Android. Now, as somebody that has a Retroid Pocket Flip, which is a small Android emulator in a clamshell design, I can say that this is really good news, but don't get too excited, because what I didn't see in this footage is an SD card slot. And since this device is designed for streaming games from your PS5, I'm guessing that the storage is going to be on the very low end. So absent opening this thing up and soldering in an SD card slot yourself, I don't think you're going to be using this for emulation all that much. I will say there's a lot of people who are down on Project Q. Personally, I'm waiting before I rush to judgment. While I do fully anticipate that Sony will price this thing outside of its usefulness, There are rumors of it hitting a sweet spot of $199. I still think $150 would be a great price point, and if they sold it for $99, this thing would literally fly off the shelves. I just don't see Sony making it that cheap. I mean, the Backbone controller by itself is $99, and this thing has an 8-inch Android tablet built in. There's no way Sony hits the right price point here, but I've got a bucket of hopium here, and I'm willing to share. By the way, if you accidentally bought the Battle Pass in Diablo 4, you are not alone. When you open up the Seasonal tab, the Activate Premium Battle Pass button is automatically highlighted. I clicked to see what would happen. It didn't have any confirmation, it just activated it. Diablo-focused YouTuber Rurikon said that it got him too, and he felt like it was designed maliciously. I have to say, I totally agree with him. Now, Blizzard has responded, saying that there's a fix so you don't automatically highlight that button, but come on, there really should be a confirmation when you click on that. I played Diablo 4 on multiple devices that have back pedals like my DualSense Edge controller, and I have hit the X button on that controller while it's sitting on my lap and I'm texting many times. Oh, and that Battle Pass that I accidentally activated, apparently the currency that you earn from playing through it isn't really enough to buy pretty much anything. Playing through the Season of the Malignant earns you Platinum, but getting all the way through the season only earns you 666 Platinum. Now, I love that they went with 666 to stay true to the Hell theme, but the cheapest item that you can get on the shop is 800 Platinum. I personally don't really care about cosmetics and the stuff that you get from the store, but other games, even other games from Activision, Blizzard's parent company, do give you enough currency to buy the next Battle Pass if you finish it. This rewards the most hardcore players, which I really appreciate. This just seems predatory, though, as players are more likely to end up trying to make up the difference of Platinum with a credit card. It's really lame that a game that I love so much has so many problems directly tied to monetization, but hey, you gotta maximize that shareholder value above all else, right? Baldur's Gate 3 is coming out soon, August 3rd in fact, but if you want to get caught up on the series and play Baldur's Gate 1 and Baldur's Gate 2 before the third one comes out, essentially it's hopeless. Mathematically, you can't do it at this point, but you can pick up those games for a ridiculously good deal through Humble Bundle right now. Now, if you love classic CRPGs, you probably already have this game, but what you probably don't have is a pre-order for MythForce. MythForce is a first-person roguelike shooter with drop-in and drop-out online play, and you might be wondering, what does this have to do with classic CRPGs? Well, its art is heavily inspired by the D&D cartoon, so it's kind of a stretch to include it here, but it's still a great deal. I was already planning on picking up MythForce as its art style is pulling at my nostalgia strings, but now I have even more reason. Full disclosure, I am a humble partner, but I'd be telling you about this anyway, and it's a crazy good deal, especially for people that love old school CRPGs that will run great on the Steam Deck. Not only that, but thanks to the Steam Deck's trackpads, you can still play these games in a very mouse and keyboard-like style. So if you've been thinking about getting MythForce and you're missing out any of these other games in the bundle, now is the time, and thanks for supporting the channel. Let's wrap things up with an indie pick for the day. This is a roguelike chess puzzle game with guns. It's called Shotgun King: The Final Checkmate, and if that sounds crazy to you, then you're absolutely going to want to watch the video of this gameplay. It looks fantastic and totally unique, and it's part of this month's Humble Choice. There is a link in the description. Anyway, I hope that you have an awesome day, and if you like this video, then you're probably going to like this video too. From the Nerd Nest, I'm Bill. Stay rad, everybody.